Good morning, everyone. I'm Kat Akery, Deputy Editor at BookPage, where we connect readers with their next great book. Welcome to the second installment of our new author interview series here on Facebook Live. We're so pleased to be chatting with Nancy Johnson, whose first novel, The Kindest Lie, published by William Morrow, is a heartfelt and incredibly layered portrayal of a from Chicago named Ruth, who returns to her small town in rural Indiana to seek answers about the baby she gave away when she was 17. And there she strikes up an unexpected friendship with a poor white boy named Midnight. Welcome, Nancy, and thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you're staying warm on this February morning.
Hello, it's good to be with you, Kat. I'm trying to. It's definitely cold and snowy, though, here in Chicago. But at least I'm in my apartment, so I'm warm.
You know, I'm really excited to talk about this book, which feels like, in many ways, the ultimate book club novel. There's so many different angles that we could talk about. So first, I want you to take us back to 2008. You know, it's 2021 now. It's been a pretty long time. Who were we, as much as there can be a we, and who were you?
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that I wrote the book, during the Trump administration, over the past 4 years, but I really wrote it in Obama's second term. And so when I think about 2008, there are just so many parallels in terms of who we are. For one, there's the financial stress of 2008. We were going through the Great Recession at that time. A lot of people were worried about losing their source of income. And you see that in the novel, in The Kindest Lie, when Ruth goes back to her hometown of Canton, Indiana. Her brother Eli has lost his job at the plant. And that auto plant was the beating heart of the town. Same thing with the boy you mentioned, Midnight, and his father has also lost his job at the plant. So we definitely had that economic anxiety in 2008, and that definitely mirrors what we see now in 2021. Again, we are going through some really rough economic times with the pandemic and all these stressors. And I think that the thing I was interested in with the economic strain of both time periods was that seems to exacerbate the racial tensions. And you definitely saw a lot of racial tension. I know I was saying, if we do this and we did elect a Black president, we are now in a post-racial era, but definitely there was this huge chasm and divide between Black and white America. And that's really what inspired me to write The Kindest Lie. And then if you look at where we are today, you can see that we are more divided and, there's this chasm there that is unlike anything I think that we've seen before in America. We're definitely still very broken and divided along racial lines.
You know, I love fiction's ability to help process and digest things that we've experienced by, reflecting the humanity of those events back at us, the individual experience. To be honest, I'm kind of dreading the first batch of COVID novels because it'll probably be too soon. The processing won't be complete. Now, obviously 2008 wasn't like World War II or the pandemic, but it was huge. So what was your process for beginning to digest that?
Yeah, I think for me, I wrote about what happened in 2008, but it wasn't until 2012 when I really started thinking about how to put this particular novel together. I think I did need some of that distance from the election to be able to write about that particular period at the end of 2008. I've had some people even say, is it too early though, even now to have written about the Obama years? Have we had enough distance from it? I think for me, it was obviously long enough. I don't know if it is for everybody to be able to really analyze and understand what it meant. But I think for me, I wasn't really analyzing the Obama presidency or talking about his presidency because the entirety of the book takes place before he's even inaugurated. Mm-hmm. So all of it really was about the rise of Obama and him coming to power and that particular time period. And it was also a very bittersweet time because my father was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer at that time. And so I knew how important it was for him to vote. And he was bedridden by the time of the election, but luckily I convinced him to vote early. And so he was a man who would, live through Jim Crow and the Great Depression and all of that. And he cast the last vote of his life for America's first Black president. And so that's a period that I kept returning to. So not just because of the sense of hope and then this kind of loss of hope for the country, but also just how bittersweet and poignant a time it was for me personally.
Mhm.
And so I think I brought all of that with me to crafting this particular novel. And so,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
not too soon if you've been sort of processing that for, generations.
right, right. That's true. So yeah, certainly not too soon for me.
So this is a short question with likely a pretty long answer. What is the kindest lie?
First titles I came up with for the book. And I kept thinking, oh, these folks in publishing are going to say, no, 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 we need to change the title. And I kept waiting because I just considered it a working title, but then it just stuck and it stayed with the book and no one ever said or even questioned a different title or, coming up with something new. And so I love it. The Kindest Lie works on several levels. For one, on the more um, intimate level of the characters, I'm talking about the lies that like Ruth is telling herself. Ruth is telling herself that she can walk away from her life, her past in Ganton, Indiana, walk away from the son that she gave birth to, walk away from her grandmother and her brother and have this fancy new life as an engineer and not really be tethered to it. And so that's a lie she told kind of for her own self-preservation and to advance in life. And then her grandmother, that's the character of Mama, certainly tells lies. And, she tells lies to protect her granddaughter and her grandson. She believes she's doing what she needs to do, for them to be successful and achieve the American dream and achieve more than what she was able to achieve. And so that's why the lies are kind, is because of why people tell them. But also on a macro level, it's about America and the lies that America has told itself as well about being more honorable and decent and equitable than it really is.
Mhm. Now you have a background in journalism. What's that shift like from journalism to fiction? What did you bring with you that sets you apart?
Yeah, well, honestly, I left journalism long before I started writing
Mhm.
fiction. So I had some distance and I started doing corporate communications and public relations. But I did journalism for more than a decade. So I spent quite a bit of my working life as a journalist. And I certainly bring a lot of those skills with me to writing novels. For one, it's a different kind of structure of story. And, obviously a novel is a much longer and bigger piece of work than a minute and a half or 2 minutes on television. But still, just the process of telling stories I learned. Also, the curiosity about people. When I'm out covering stories, I've met people from every walk of life. I've covered factory town in this book, and I've covered factory towns, many of them in news, particularly during the years that I worked in Wisconsin. I was always, covering those kinds of towns, meeting the people, getting to know who they are. And this journalism just forces me to get into communities and meet people that I never would have normally met in my everyday life if I were doing some other kind of work. So there's the beauty of that. Also, the language, broadcast journalism, it teaches you so much about being concise and writing for the ear. And so when I sit down to work on my manuscript, I go back and I review what I wrote the day before and I read it aloud. And so I can hear how the story sounds to my ear and what the rhythm of the language is and the cadence. And I definitely learned that from journalism, television journalism.
And that makes a lot of sense. There's such a strong voice to your novel, and it makes a lot of sense that you would have spoken it aloud to keep that voice strong from beginning to end. I can totally see that.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you also brought up small towns because I feel like we're a very sprawling nation, and there seems to be a pretty constant attempt to try to understand something about small towns. What's your perspective on that? What do you feel like you see about small towns that you wish you could show other people, whether they're in those small towns or if they're in a big city and don't have any experience in small towns?
Yeah. I mean, Ganton, Indiana is the small town of my novel. And it just made sense because it was so close knit. And I wanted a town where people, but also when there's tension, it makes it more difficult. When you're in a small town, you really can't escape your neighbors because they're right there. And you grow up really knowing these people and everybody is so interconnected. Um, and industry, like the auto plant, it's like I said, it's like the beating heart of the town. And that's what keeps the town alive, I think, is having that kind of industry there. And then when you lose that, people are left, kind of not knowing where to turn next. And so I really love portraying this kind of a town. But I think in terms of when we think about like politics now and small town America, I think we tend to think of it as a monolith, and I don't think these small towns are. Rural America is not, everybody is not the same. I think there's this misnomer that, oh, if you live, that our politics, that it's, you're either for Trump or you're for, Biden, depending on whether you may, bear some of that out on a larger, level. But I think we can't paint everybody in these towns with one brush. So I think that's important to really think about it. I think about Trumpism, and some of that comes, coastal elites are backing some of that, when we think of that. You know what I mean? This is not all small town America. And I also think that part of it is America and the structure of America wanting to pit us against each other in many ways. This, rural versus urban, and Black versus white, and with the socioeconomic differences, racial differences, all that. And I don't think we should reinforce those kinds of barriers between us.
I was recently poking around online just to see, what the public reception to the Kindest Lie is, which it's all hugely positive, which is just so lovely to see and not surprising. And because the novel is so layered, it really is possible to talk about it without talking about the politics. We see this all the time, the lengths to which people will go in order to avoid talking about the things they don't want to think about, especially race and class, the hoops they'll jump through. But you've created a work of art and released it to the world, and now it belongs to readers to make those kinds of, or to make any kind of assumption, or to look at it through any lens through which they choose. So I want to know your thoughts. Is your book political in your mind, and how are you handling the process of releasing your idea to other people?
Yeah, I remember, I think I've seen the comment you're talking about on Amazon with
Yeah.
someone asked if the book is political. And I remember seeing that question there, and I'm thinking, some people want to know that because they're going to avoid the book if they consider it to be political, because we're in this environment that's so hyper politicized, and people want to avoid, and people are getting it all day long in social media and traditional media, and they are like, okay, enough of it. And I don't want that when I want to, escape to a book, to a novel. And I get it. I think the person who answered that, I also know who that is too. And I think he was right in saying it's not political in the sense that I don't have a political agenda. It's set at the dawn of the Obama era, and that's just what kicks it off. But like, it's not a book about Obama or about, anything about, really about politics in the way that we think of politics. But I also think that the personal is political in many ways. We know that saying to be true. And so quite often when you think about that, I think our own personal experiences and the experiences of my characters in the book are definitely tied to structures, socio-political structures, that put them in the situation they're in, and so I do think there's a combination of personal and political that's at play there. But certainly when I wrote that sense of the overtly political, and I didn't want to be moralistic or didactic in any way. And one interesting thing is that I've had, as much as I talk about these issues of race and class and, the politics of that, I've had plenty of readers who've reacted to the book and they never even mention any of those issues. And they just say that, my God, this was such a wonderful family story. And they think about sibling rivalry between Ruth and Eli in the book and their own siblings. And, they think about their own grandmothers. I had a woman who commented that to me on Instagram. She said, oh, I totally connected with Mama, the grandmother in the book, Ruth's grandmother. And she said, my grandmother is French. I think it was French. No, it was Belgian and Jewish. And she said she makes hot water cornbread and she keeps a can of bacon drippings on the back of the stove, just like Mama in the book. And so people are connecting with the story on many different levels. And I love that. They don't have to connect with it.
Speaking of these family relationships, and they form just such a scaffolding that just holds the book together. And it's so much fun to read, fun, emotional and compelling and heartbreaking to read, the ways that those, the family has heartbreaking secrets and is trying to repair them, and all these things that we kind of expect from a story that is about, the past coming back. So I would love to hear your thoughts on the nature of reconciliation, moving on from hard divisions that sometimes feel impossible to fix. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's interesting. The idea of the past catching up to us. Mm-hmm. I think that it takes acknowledgement of what's gone on, particularly between Ruth and Mama. You see that. And then Ruth with herself too. There has to be an acknowledgement, and then, there's the idea of forgiveness. I also explore that in the book too. And that's an interesting concept. When do you forgive? When is it a right time to forgive? Is it okay to forgive? Is it okay not to forgive? But I do think the acknowledgement is very important. And that's really key for a lot of the relationships in the book that are so fraught right now, that there hasn't been those kinds of conversations to say, yeah, here's my truth. Here's why I see the world this way and why I acted this way, and really understanding the motivations behind the people in your family, why they made the choices they made. And I think also on a larger level too, I think America's past is catching up with itself too. We have a 400+ year history of racism in America, thinking back to 1619, the first slaves coming over. Really, I don't think on the part of America about some of these issues. And so I think there's that saying about the chickens coming home to roost. And I think America is seeing that now in terms of where we are. And I think about the movie The Color Purple with Celie, when there's a scene where she's got a knife to Mister's throat, and she's about to escape from him, but she has some line, I'll probably butcher it, but something like, until you do right by me, everything you think about and touch is going to crumble, is what she says. And I think that until America does right by all of its citizens and by Black America, it's never going to be as great as it wants to be. And I think that's another truth about the past and how it catches up to us.
Mm-hmm. When answers aren't easy to come by, mm-hmm. As in the case with your novel, answers aren't easy to come by, not for Ruth in her search for, in everyday questioning of, where he fits in. And, is that reflective of your own experience? But honestly, I also would like to know, when you're creating a work of art and the answers aren't easy to come by, how do you know when that work of art is complete?
Yeah, that's a great question. I went into this book just having so many questions and wanting to understand that divide that I talk about between Black and white America and between the different socioeconomic groups. And I spent the book exploring that through the characters. But I didn't end the book with any answers to those questions. I think it just leaves you with more questions and just needing to continue the conversation. I don't know if it's questions, but just wanting to continue talking and hopefully moving toward solutions and answers. That also speaks to where the book ends. And I struggled the most with how to end The Kindest Lie, more so than how to begin it. I knew I wanted to end with a sense of hope, because I do feel hopeful about where we are and who we are. As America, I think we can change and we can be better and we can do better. But I also didn't want to tie everything up with a neat bow as if things were going to be solved in 330 some pages either. I wanted the ending to not just feel hopeful, but also to feel authentic and inevitable. And I believe I achieved that. There you have some degree of answers, for some characters, but for many, it's very ambiguous. And that's just the way life is itself. We don't know what comes next. And it's for us to imagine and to create what's going to come next.
I wanted to ask you, if you could tell 2008 Nancy Johnson anything, what would you tell her? But the more I think about that question, because there are so, what would you tell Ruth? What could you tell Midnight? What would you like to tell the reader? Like, I feel like I want some words to live by from you, or some kind of little packaged idea.
I don't think I have a packaged idea.
Yeah.
I think it's about asking yourself the hard questions
Yeah.
in life. I think that's what I want people to do, and to think about themselves in connection with the characters. I want them to just sink into the story and enjoy it and be entertained by it, first of all. This is not like I'm, delivering a treatise here, or, giving some big, heavy lesson in the book. But it would be great for people to just reflect on their own lives, think about how tethered am I to my own past? What are the expectations that others have put on me and on my life, and the sacrifices they've made for me? And how have those sacrifices shaped who I've become? Have I been able to move beyond those and define myself and my own life and what I want to do for myself? And what is will I go to achieve that dream? Those are some of the bigger life questions I think that we can all ask. And then when it comes to race in America, how do I understand race and my own part in race in America and where we are today? What part do I play? What part can I play? How can I get involved in this, and being anti-racist? And how can I be a part of making America the America that I want it to be? So just taking that kind of responsibility and thinking about it and talking about it, having the conversation. That's really what I want.
Mm-hmm. Well, Nancy, thank you so much for being with us today. I encourage all of our readers to check out the Kindest Lie, as well as the February issue of BookPage, which includes more thoughts from Nancy about her novel, as well as reviews and features to help you find your next great book. Thank you, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much.